In the vast silence of the Arctic, where the world stretches out into frozen white horizons, and the wind carries the voices of the old spirits, a people have endured for thousands of years, not in defiance of nature, but in rhythm with it. This is the story of the Inuit. Long before maps gave names to the lands above the tree line, long before colonial sails breached the icy fogs of the north, the Inuit thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Their ancestors didn't merely survive the Arctic, they made it home. Ice, snow, bone, and spirit formed the architecture of their lives. This documentary takes you across time, across shifting glaciers and ancestral memory, to uncover the history of a people whose story is one of adaptation, resilience, and identity. We begin not with contact, not with conquest, but with the land. To understand the Inuit is to understand their environment. The Arctic isn't merely a backdrop, it's a living presence. It is a world where light and dark battle for dominance across months. Winters bring a long darkness. Summers bring the midnight sun. And in this rhythm of extremes, life finds a way. The Inuit are not a single monolithic group, but a collection of indigenous peoples spread across what is now Canada, Greenland, Alaska, and parts of Russia. They are culturally and linguistically linked, though with local differences. The term Inuit, meaning the people, refers to the group as a whole, though regional identities like the Inupiat of Alaska, the Kalalit of Greenland, and various Inuit groups across the Canadian North retain their own traditions and names. To trace their roots, we look back over 4,000 years. The earliest ancestors of the Inuit are known as the Paleo-Eskimo cultures, arriving in the Arctic from Siberia, likely following the migration of game across the Bering Land Bridge, when Asia and North America were still joined by ice and earth. Among these early peoples were the Sakak and the Independence cultures, whose tools, remains, and seasonal dwellings are still uncovered beneath permafrost and ancient snow. Then came the Dorset people, an advanced Paleo-Eskimo culture that emerged around 500 BCE. The Dorsets, known to the Inuit as the Tuniat, were a mysterious and quiet people. According to oral traditions, they were tall, strong, and shy, avoiding contact with others. Their carved artifacts, exquisite figures of polar bears, hunters, and spirits, show a deep spiritual connection to the animals and land. They built semi-subterranean homes of stone and skin, hunted seal through ice holes, and may have used dog sleds, but their culture would eventually vanish. Around 1000 CE, a new wave of people moved eastward from Alaska, Thule hunters, ancestors of today's Inuit. The Thule brought with them advanced technology and a new way of life. They traveled with dog sleds, used large Umiak boats made of seal or walrus skin stretched over driftwood frames, and most crucially, hunted whales. Their arrival marked the end of the Dorset culture. Some say the Thule displaced them. Others say the Dorsets faded, overtaken by climate change and a changing ecological balance. The truth may lie somewhere in between. The Thule adapted quickly to the varying Arctic environments. In western regions, they pursued bowhead whales in open waters. Further east, seals became more dominant in their diet. The seasonal rhythms of life, moving inland during summer to fish and hunt caribou, then returning to the coast in winter for seal hunts, formed the backbone of their subsistence strategy. Houses were built from sod, stone, and whalebone. In the coldest seasons, the iconic igloo, made from carefully cut snow blocks, offered a warm, dry refuge, its entrance tunnel trapping cold air. Contrary to popular belief, igloos were not used year-round nor universally across Inuit regions, but they remain a powerful symbol of Inuit ingenuity. The Inuit diet was primarily meat and fat. Caribou, seal, walrus, whale, fish, all hunted with techniques honed by millennia. Meat was eaten raw, boiled, or dried. Blubber was essential, providing calories, lamp fuel, and waterproofing. Every part of the animal had value. Bones became tools. Skins became clothing. Sinew became thread. Waste was not a concept. They lived in balance with the ecosystem. And yet, this existence required more than physical endurance. It required knowledge. Deep, intergenerational knowledge of ice patterns, animal migrations, weather changes. This was a world with no written maps, yet the Inuit knew it intimately. They could read the snow's texture, the clouds' motion, the stars, the wind. Elders passed down this knowledge through oral traditions, songs, and stories. The land was alive, filled with spirits. Every hunt had meaning. Every act had consequence. Spiritual life was tightly woven into the fabric of daily survival. Inuit spirituality is animistic. Everything has a soul. Animals, stones, water, weather. The sea goddess Sedna, central in many Inuit myths, controls the animals and punishes hunters who offend the balance. Shamans, known as Angakuit, served as mediators between the human world and the spirit realm. They healed the sick, divined causes of misfortune, and ensured harmony with unseen forces. Children were raised with stories that taught values, taboos, and practical wisdom. Legends like that of the blind boy who tamed the spirit bear or the orphan girl who traveled with the northern lights carried cultural memory across time. The harshness of the environment demanded cooperation. Families were tight-knit. Sharing was essential. A successful hunt fed not just a family, but a community. Then contact came. The Norse arrived in Greenland around 985 CE, establishing settlements that would last several centuries. They encountered the Thule Inuit, though interactions were rare and often hostile. Norse sagas mention Skraelings, strangers they feared and fought. These first contacts left few traces, but marked the beginning of a long and often painful entanglement with outsiders. The real disruption began in the 16th and 17th centuries as European whalers and explorers pushed into the north. Dutch, Basque, English, and later American whalers set up seasonal camps along Arctic coasts. They hunted whales for oil and baleen, sometimes trading with Inuit for meat, furs, or assistance. Guns, iron tools, cloth, these new materials entered Inuit life gradually. Some technologies were welcomed, others resisted. But with trade came disease. Smallpox, measles, influenza, illnesses previously unknown, spread rapidly and devastated communities. Oral histories recall whole families lost. The old knowledge keepers gone, the shamans gone. And with them, much of the spiritual and practical knowledge of generations. Missionaries arrived next, often with good intentions but culturally destructive consequences. They introduced Christianity, often violently suppressing traditional beliefs, languages, and practices. Shamanism was declared evil, drums were burned, children were taught to reject their heritage. By the 19th century, colonization took root. Canada began asserting control over the north. The Hudson's Bay Company established trading posts, drawing Inuit deeper into the fur trade economy. Fox pelts, highly prized in Europe, became currency. Inuit hunters, once self-sufficient, began relying on trade for tools, ammunition, and flour. The shift from subsistence to dependence was subtle but profound. Settlement life replaced seasonal camps. Snowmobiles replaced dog sleds. Shotguns replaced harpoons. Mission schools replaced elders. And perhaps most tragically, residential schools, set up to forcibly assimilate Inuit children into Euro-Canadian society, ripped thousands from their families, language, and identity. Children were punished for speaking Inuktitut. Many were abused, some never returned. The scars remain today, in memory, in culture, in community, yet the Inuit endured. In the 20th century, waves of political and cultural awakening began to stir. The Inuit, like many indigenous peoples, began asserting their rights, not just to land, but to culture, language, and governance. One of the most significant milestones came in 1999, when Nunavut was established, Canada's newest territory, carved out of the Northwest Territories. It was the result of decades of negotiation between Inuit leaders and the federal government. It marked a reclaiming, not just of land, but of voice. Today, Inuit communities across Canada, Alaska, and Greenland continue to face challenges: climate change, food insecurity, housing crises, and the lingering effects of colonization. The melting ice threatens traditional hunting routes. Global warming is not theoretical in the Arctic. It is present, daily, undeniable. And yet, resilience defines the Inuit story. From the ancient Thule hunters to the youth of Nunavut rapping in Inuktitut, the Inuit have always adapted, always moved forward without forgetting the past. Their art, soapstone carvings, throat singing, tattoo revival, digital storytelling, bridges tradition and modernity. Their knowledge, once dismissed, is now being recognized by scientists, especially in the study of climate and wildlife. Inuit voices are being heard in Parliament, at the United Nations, in schools, and around dinner tables. This is not a story of extinction. It is a story of survival, of adaptation, of identity reclaimed. Inuit history is not a frozen relic of the past. It is alive, in language, in laughter, in land. It is written in the wind-carved snow, in the drum's echo, in the quiet strength of a people who have always known how to listen to the ice. The 20th century was a time of profound transition for the Inuit, a pivot between worlds, between the rhythm of the land and the machinery of the modern state. To the south, cities were rising, war was reshaping nations, and the age of industry had taken full hold. But in the north, the Inuit still moved with the snow, followed the seasons, and hunted under the unbroken sky, until they couldn't. Government presence in the Arctic was limited for much of the early 1900s. The North was distant, out of sight and out of mind. But with the expansion of sovereignty concerns, particularly during the Cold War, everything changed. Canada, fearing encroachment from other powers, decided it needed to assert its authority in the Arctic, not with military force, but through policy, presence, and bureaucracy. Inuit lives, once led by the natural order of migration, family ties, and ancient knowledge, were increasingly redirected by government decisions far removed from the tundra. In the 1950s and 1960s, a forced relocation campaign began. Officials, often under the guise of helping the Inuit access services like healthcare and education, moved entire families, sometimes by deception, sometimes by coercion, hundreds of kilometers from their home regions. Communities were uprooted from familiar territories in northern Quebec or Baffin Island and sent to high Arctic settlements like Resolute and Grise Fiord. The relocations were catastrophic. Inuit families were dropped into unfamiliar landscapes with harsher climates, unfamiliar animal migrations, and few resources. Supplies were scarce. The game didn't move where it used to. The government had promised support, housing, equipment, but much of it never came. Families endured the first winters in makeshift tents, with little food and no knowledge of the new land. And still, they endured. The high Arctic relocations have since become a symbol of systemic failure, a cold political calculus that disregarded the knowledge, autonomy, and lives of the Inuit. It was decades before the Canadian government formally acknowledged the harm done. An official apology came in 2010, but the trauma, the memory of isolation and betrayal, still runs deep. As southern institutions expanded into the north, Inuit children were swept into the residential school system. The goal was explicit: to strip them of their identity, language, and culture. Generations were raised in institutions where speaking Inuktitut could bring punishment. Family separation became a cruel norm. Abuse, emotional, physical, and sexual, was common. Children returned home years later, estranged from their families, unable to communicate in their mother tongue, caught between two worlds. Some never came home at all. Graves still exist, unmarked, unnamed, the legacy of a system designed to erase. The trauma passed through generations, not only in memory, but in broken bonds, substance abuse, poverty, and suicide. And yet within that pain, sparks of resistance burned quietly. A whisper from an elder, a song remembered, a word passed down. As the 20th century progressed, so too did the desire for self-determination. Inuit leaders began to rise: activists, negotiators, politicians, artists. Across the Arctic, from Alaska to Greenland, a pan-Inuit movement took shape. It was not one of rebellion through violence, but of resurgence through voice. In Canada, organizations like the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, founded in 1971, emerged as a political force. They demanded land claims, cultural preservation, and recognition of rights long denied. Slowly, Canada was forced to listen. The land claims movement culminated in a series of monumental agreements. In 1975, the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement was signed, recognizing Inuit rights to parts of northern Quebec. It was the first modern treaty in Canada and marked the beginning of a new relationship, fraught but forward-facing. But the crown jewel of this movement came in 1993 with the signing of the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. After decades of negotiations, protests, and community organizing, Inuit leaders secured not just land and compensation, but governance. Nunavut, meaning our land, was born on April 1st, 1999. It became the largest land claim settlement in Canadian history and created a territory where Inuit are the majority. For the first time in modern Canada, Indigenous people were not merely subjects of policy, but authors of it. Inuit-led government, Inuit voices in education, health, justice, it was, and still is, a bold experiment in cultural and political self-determination. But sovereignty is not a destination, it is a practice, and the challenges remain immense. Inuit communities continue to grapple with intergenerational trauma, high rates of youth suicide, inadequate housing, and food insecurity. The high cost of living in the north, where a gallon of milk can cost 3 times the southern price, means that even in the heart of traditional territories, survival is under pressure. Mental health crises, underfunded schools, limited access to health care, these are not relics of the past, but daily realities. The promise of Nunavut, though monumental, was not a cure-all, and looming over all of it is the Arctic's greatest and most immediate threat: climate change. For the Inuit, the land is memory. It is teacher, archive, provider, and that land is transforming. Sea ice, once thick and predictable, now breaks early, melts fast, and drifts unpredictably. Hunters who once knew exactly when to travel across fjords now find themselves caught in slush ice, at risk of drowning. Permafrost is thawing, collapsing buildings, roads, and ancient graves. Caribou herds shift their migrations. Polar bears roam closer to settlements. Storms are fiercer. Seasons are unreliable. For most of the world, climate change is a graph. For the Inuit, it is a cracked seal skin tent, a snowmobile through thin ice, a grandmother who remembers when the ice stayed until June. And yet, Inuit knowledge, often overlooked by Western science, is now gaining recognition. Known as Inuit Korjamajatukanggit, or Ik, this body of traditional ecological knowledge encompasses generations of observation and adaptation. It includes weather patterns, ice behavior, animal habits, and sustainable practices that are now being sought out by researchers around the globe. More and more, Inuit voices are joining global conversations about the climate, testifying at UN panels, publishing in scientific journals, leading community-driven research initiatives. Because while the world debates the future, the Inuit live in its front line, and they are not waiting. Across the north, a cultural renaissance is taking shape. Language revitalization is growing, with Inuktitut and Inuinnaqtun taught in schools, broadcast on radio, and featured in children's books. Programs aim to bring elders and youth together, passing down not just language, but values, stories, and knowledge. Art continues to flourish. In soapstone carvings and etchings, in digital animation and throat singing, Inuit artists are bridging past and present. The world is listening. Exhibits in global museums, viral online performances, award-winning films. These are the voices of a culture that never stopped speaking. Inuit youth are reclaiming their identity on their own terms. Some wear traditional tattoos, once banned, now revived. Others fuse hip-hop with drum dancing. A generation raised in two worlds, shaping a third. The trauma hasn't vanished, but neither has the strength. Healing is slow, uneven, and imperfect, but it is happening. Justice, too, is evolving. Inuit leaders are pushing for legal reforms that integrate traditional forms of justice, emphasizing restoration, community, and context over punitive Southern models. In some communities, Inuit courts are reintroducing elder councils and culturally appropriate sentencing. It is not a return to the past, it is a return to balance. Inuit women, long the backbone of communities, are now at the forefront of leadership. Mayors, ministers, filmmakers, hunters, mothers, they are not just surviving, they are shaping the future. And still the land sings. The tundra breathes with old stories. The aurora still dances across the sky, carrying the whispers of those who walked before. Children still ride dog sleds. Hunters still follow tracks in the snow. Elders still speak in quiet, rhythmic Inuktitut, telling of spirits, weather, and the long arc of memory. The Inuit have lived through colonization, relocation, assimilation, and climate change. They have adapted, resisted, remembered. Their history is not one of disappearance. It is one of endurance. The world looks north now, for oil, for trade routes, for data. But the Inuit have always looked north, not for extraction, but for home. This is their land. These are their stories. To understand the Inuit people today, we must listen not only to their past, but to their voices in the present, the way memory echoes in modern language, the way tradition bends but does not break under the weight of time. While the story of the Inuit is ancient, it is also still unfolding, day by day, in communities across the Arctic. Let us now journey deeper into the fabric of Inuit daily life, across the different regions that shape their world. Across Canada's vast north, Greenland's icy expanse, the Alaskan tundra, and the remote shores of Siberia. Though connected by language roots and shared traditions, each region has evolved uniquely, influenced by geography, colonial contact, and resilience strategies. We begin in Greenland, Kalaallit Nunaat, the land of the Kalaallit. Greenland is the world's largest island, over 80% covered by an ice sheet. Yet along its coasts, life thrives. The Kalaallit, Greenland's Inuit people, have occupied this land for over 1,000 years. Descended from the Thule, they built their lives around sea ice and marine hunting, just as their Canadian and Alaskan kin did. Under Danish colonial rule for centuries, Greenland was treated as a remote periphery. But in the 20th century, a nationalist movement emerged. Greenlanders wanted autonomy, not just as subjects of Denmark, but as stewards of their own identity. In 1979, Greenland gained home rule, and in 2009, self-government was expanded, granting the Kalaallit significant control over internal affairs, including education, policing, and natural resources. Today, Greenland is forging its own path, politically, economically, and culturally. Discussions around full independence continue. Some dream of a fully sovereign Inuit nation. Others weigh the economic realities of severing from Denmark. The tension between self-determination and global dependency echoes across Inuit regions. Still, Greenlandic Inuit culture is thriving. In Nuuk, the capital, modern apartments overlook waters once hunted by kayaks. Inuit rappers perform in the Greenlandic language, blending urban beats with ancestral themes. Artists paint the spirits of the sea onto concrete walls. Hunters still go out in winter, rifles on their backs, dogs pulling sleds through fjord-side snow. To the west, in Alaska, the Inupiat and Yupik communities carry their own threads of the Inuit tapestry. Here, in this vast and diverse state, Inuit people faced a different kind of colonization, one led by American expansionism. In 1867, the United States purchased Alaska from Russia, and the Inupiat found themselves governed by a distant capital that knew little of the North. For years, traditional life was suppressed, especially in the 20th century. Schools punished the use of native languages. Outsiders imposed education systems, laws, and economics. But the Inupiat adapted, resisted, and rebuilt. A defining moment came in 1971 with the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act ANCSA. It extinguished Aboriginal land claims in exchange for land ownership and monetary compensation. Though controversial, it allowed the creation of native corporations, which now play a major role in regional governance and economy. Modern Inupiat communities like Utqiagvik formerly borrow balanced technology and tradition. Oil development brought both opportunity and threat. Some support it for jobs and funding. Others warn of the ecological and cultural cost. The debates are fierce, but led by Inuit themselves. Subsistence hunting remains central. The bowhead whale hunt, especially, is a cultural cornerstone. Passed down over generations, this communal hunt is not just about food, but about identity. Elders instruct youth on how to strike, how to wait, how to respect the animal and the sea. The whales feed not only bodies, but spirits. Further west still, on the edge of the Bering Sea, a small group of Inuit remain in Siberia. The Siberian Yupik, or Inuit, live in remote villages like Norken and Cyaniki. Cut off from their Alaskan relatives by the Cold War, they endured the harshness of Soviet policies. Their languages, spiritual practices, and hunting rights were suppressed under collectivization. Some communities were relocated entirely, moved from traditional coastal camps into centralized Soviet settlements, erasing centuries of connection to hunting grounds. Many sacred ceremonies were banned. The traditional sea mammal hunts were restricted or state-controlled, and yet the language survived. The songs were sung quietly, then openly after the collapse of the USSR. Today, efforts are underway to preserve what remains of Siberian Inuit traditions, though the population is small and aging. Returning now to Canada, the largest concentration of Inuit peoples live across 4 regions. The territory of Nunavut, the Inuvialuit settlement region in the Northwest Territories, Nunavik in northern Quebec, and Nunatsiavut in Labrador. Each of these regions has carved out its own land claim agreements, granting various degrees of self-governance. Each tells its own story of cultural resurgence. In Nunavut, where the Inuit are the majority, Inuit language and tradition shape the territory's institutions. Government offices incorporate Inuit Korjamajatukanget traditional knowledge into their policies. Yet challenges remain: teacher shortages, housing crises, health disparities. The dream of Nunavut is still being built, brick by brick, in communities like Iqaluit, Rankin Inlet, and Pond Inlet. In Nunavik, the Inuit of northern Quebec navigate the complexities of being Inuit within a francophone province. Their land claim, the first of its kind, opened the door for other indigenous negotiations. The region now has its own school board, its own health board, and growing control over resource management. In Nunatsiavut, the Labrador Inuit have made strides in environmental stewardship, co-managing lands and waters with the Canadian government. They monitor caribou herds, fish stocks, and climate data. Their governance model is praised internationally for its blend of tradition and science. And in the Inuvialuit settlement region, Western Arctic communities like Tuktoyaktuk and Inuvik lead the way in balancing development and preservation. They run cultural camps where youth learn skin preparation, drum dancing, language, and land navigation. The Inuvialuit Final Agreement of 1984 was one of Canada's most comprehensive, ensuring land title, economic development, and wildlife co-management. Across all these regions, a common thread remains: the desire to preserve, to protect, and to prosper on their own terms. But this is not just a story of governments and treaties. It's about people. A young girl in Arviat tracing her grandmother's tattoos and asking what they mean. A hunter in Clyde River repairing his kajak with traditional sealskin thread. a teacher in Kuujjuaq developing language curriculum in Inuktitut, a grandmother in Kangiksualudjuaq preparing maktark, whale skin and blubber, for her family. A teenager in Nuuk performing a song that blends Greenlandic lyrics with hip-hop beats. A community gathering in Kotzebue, where elders tell of the time before snow machines. These moments are the heartbeat of Inuit life today. They are neither frozen in time nor wholly modern. They are both. And more, they carry memory like a harpoon carried across the back, balanced, precise, ready when needed. Inuit knowledge is not just about hunting or weather. It is a worldview. It is the understanding that everything is connected, that the seal is not just food but relative, that the ice speaks. That history is not in books but in bones, in songs, in wind. It is the understanding that survival is not rugged individualism. It is community. It is laughter in a snow-covered cabin. It is shared food. It is the quiet endurance of those who refuse to vanish. The Inuit are not disappearing. They are transforming on their own terms. As the world turns its eyes north, chasing oil, shipping routes, and geopolitical power, the Inuit stand at a crossroads. They are no longer voiceless, no longer passive subjects of history. They are authors of their future, in councils and classrooms, in research stations and recording studios, in sleds and on screens. They are writing the next chapter, and still the land watches. Still the snow falls. Still the ice shifts, and the people remain. As we move deeper into the present, we must confront a reality that casts a long shadow over the future of the Arctic, the accelerating pace of climate change. But for the Inuit, climate change is not a matter of policy or politics. It is personal. It is physical. It is ancestral. It is happening now. Across the circumpolar north, the Inuit are bearing witness to transformations that are both rapid and relentless. The sea ice that once formed thick, stable highways for travel and hunting is breaking up earlier, becoming thinner, and disappearing entirely in places. Where elders once read the ice with intimate certainty, reading the cracks, the color, the texture, now even the most experienced can be caught off guard by conditions that no longer follow predictable patterns. The animals, too, are shifting. Seals surface in unfamiliar areas. Polar bears, struggling to find sea ice, wander closer to communities. Caribou herds, once reliable in their seasonal migrations, now take unexpected routes, arrive at different times, or not at all. The rhythms of subsistence that have guided Inuit life for thousands of years are being disrupted. These are not inconveniences, they are existential shifts. A broken hunting route can mean a hungry family. A misread ice flow can mean death. When a hunter falls through thinning ice, it is not just a tragedy. It is a disruption of lineage, of memory, of instruction. And as the ice melts, it threatens not only lives, but the entire system of knowledge that relies on its presence. And yet, even in the face of this crisis, the Inuit are not passive. They are among the world's most important climate observers, watching, recording, adapting. In communities across Nunavut and Greenland, traditional knowledge is now being paired with scientific methods. Inuit hunters are collaborating with climatologists and oceanographers. Drones fly overhead, GPS devices track animal movement, and elders interpret the patterns. Data is logged, but so are memories, stories of past winters, of the sound of the ice, of the feel of the snow underfoot. This fusion of modern science and ancestral wisdom is creating a powerful new model for resilience. It is not just academic, it is vital. Consider the hunters of Clyde River, Nunavut. For years, they warned that seismic testing, used by oil companies to map the seafloor, was disrupting marine life. Whales, sensitive to sound, were avoiding traditional hunting areas. The government dismissed these concerns, so the community took action. With support from other Inuit regions, the people of Clyde River took their fight all the way to Canada's Supreme Court. In 2017, they won. The court ruled that the government had failed to properly consult the Inuit, upholding the community's right to protect their environment and way of life. It was a landmark case, a remote hamlet of fewer than 1,000 people standing up to industry and winning, a reminder that Inuit voices, long silenced, now echo in the highest chambers of power. This shift towards self-advocacy and sovereignty is reshaping what it means to be Inuit in the 21st century. The younger generation, born into a digital world, are not letting go of their heritage, they are remaking it. Take the revival of Inuit tattooing, a tradition once stamped out by missionaries and colonial shame. For generations, Inuit women bore tattoos that marked life transitions, puberty, childbirth, marriage. Each line, each curve told a story. But with colonization came stigma and eventually silence. Now that silence is breaking. Across the north, Inuit women are reclaiming this art. Using both traditional hand-poke methods and modern tools, they inscribe their skin with ancestral patterns. Some tattoo their faces, others their hands. Each mark is a defiance, a remembrance, a declaration. We are still here. And it's not just tattoos. Throat singing, once nearly extinguished, now echoes in concert halls and viral videos. Originally sung by women, often in pairs, this form of musical play is rhythmic, guttural, and intimate. It mimics the sound of nature, wind, geese, the rhythm of breath. Suppressed by churches, it nearly vanished. But young Inuit women are bringing it back, weaving it into contemporary performances, sharing it with the world. Across the arts, Inuit creators are exploding onto the world stage. Filmmakers like Zacharias Kunuk, who directed Atanarjuat, The Fast Runner, the first feature film in Inuktitut, have changed global perceptions of Inuit storytelling. That film, rooted entirely in Inuit myth and cast with Inuit actors, won awards worldwide. It wasn't just a film, it was an act of cultural restoration. Visual artists like Ani Putuguk, Kenneduak Ashivak, and Shuvanai Ashuna have brought Inuit perspectives to galleries across the globe. Their drawings and prints often blend the everyday, grocery shopping, television sets, with spirits, animals, and myth. It is the Inuit lens, seeing the ancient and the modern as one. Meanwhile, musicians like Tanya Tagak, a throat singer who merges traditional sounds with experimental music, have redefined what Inuit music can be. Her work is raw, political, visceral, a soundtrack of reclamation. These are not efforts to return to the past. They are movements to define the future. Inuit culture is not frozen in amber, it is fluid like the sea. It shifts with the ice, moves with the wind, adapts with the people. Inuit politics, too, are evolving. Inuit leaders now sit in parliaments, lead negotiations with corporations, represent their people on the world stage. In Greenland, talk of full independence continues. With access to rare earth minerals and growing control over natural resources, many Kalalit believe full sovereignty is within reach. But with that comes difficult questions. How to balance environmental protection with economic development? How to avoid the resource curses that have afflicted so many indigenous regions? How to preserve culture in a world hungry for extraction? The answers are not simple, but the Inuit are not new to complexity. They have navigated shifting environments for millennia. They will navigate these waters too, and in the background always is the land. The land is not just territory, it is identity. In Inuit culture, your place of birth matters. It is part of who you are. You are not just from the north, you are from this bay, that river bend, the tundra behind the third hill. The land remembers you, even if governments do not. Many Inuit names reflect the land, names of winds, animals, ice formations. To be born in the north is to be born into a landscape that breathes with meaning. Place names are being restored. Where once colonial maps erased indigenous names, now elders are working with youth to record, preserve, and reintroduce the original names of mountains, lakes, and inlets. Maps are being rewritten. The land is speaking its original tongue again. Language, too, is central to the Inuit Renaissance. Inuktitut, Inuinnaqtun, Inuvialuktun, Kalaallisut, these languages are not just tools of communication. They carry values, philosophies, ways of thinking that are untranslatable into English or French. Efforts to revive and strengthen language education are intensifying. Immersion schools, apps, dictionaries, radio stations, and language camps are helping a new generation reclaim what was nearly lost. But it's not easy. The damage done by colonial systems was deep. Many young Inuit today grow up in homes where their parents or grandparents were punished for speaking their language. That trauma lingers. It takes courage to rebuild, and yet it is happening. A classroom in Igloolik where children practice syllabics on a chalkboard. A teenager in Nain rapping in Inuktitut on TikTok. A family in Tuktoyaktuk switching between English and Inuvialuktun as they prepare seal meat. These are the voices of survival. Not of a people clinging to the past, but of a people shaping what comes next. There is a concept in Inuit culture, a way of being, of seeing the world, that does not translate easily. It is the idea that wisdom lives not in declarations or titles, but in silence, in listening, in watching the land and learning from it. Among the Inuit, knowledge is not imposed, it is observed. It is not shouted, it is earned. This kind of knowledge, passed quietly from elder to child, from hunter to apprentice, from story to dream, has shaped Inuit survival for millennia. It's in the way snow drifts form, telling you where the wind came from, in the color of the twilight sky, warning of a coming storm. In the way a raven circles, not randomly, but with meaning. Inuit knowledge is deep, layered, intuitive. It is built not in months or years, but in generations. This knowledge is known as Inuit Korjamajachukengit, or Ik. It means that which has long been known by Inuit. But it's more than a term. It's a worldview. IQ includes values like Pidgitsernic service to others, Avaguktiet, leadership through consensus, Argiakatigianic, decision-making through discussion and mutual respect, and Pilirikatigianic, working together for a common purpose. These values are not written into constitutions. They are lived. In the days before colonial systems, Inuit governance was based on consensus and kinship. There were no chiefs, no written laws. Justice was community-based, led by elders and guided by harmony. Disputes were resolved not through punishment, but through reconciliation, story, or even song contests. When colonial governments imposed external justice systems, courts, jails, police, they disrupted that delicate social web. In many ways, the damage is still being repaired. But now, in regions like Nunavut and the Inuvialuit settlement region, Inuit values are being reintegrated into governance. Community justice committees resolve local issues using traditional models. Elders sit in on legal proceedings. In some areas, Inuit courts blend Western law with indigenous wisdom. And while not perfect, these systems reflect a core truth. Inuit governance does not need to mimic Southern models to be legitimate. It needs only to reflect Inuit ways of knowing. This resurgence of Inuit-led systems is especially vital for youth. In many Inuit communities, youth face a unique kind of burden, a legacy of displacement, trauma, and cultural disruption passed down through generations. High rates of suicide, addiction, and incarceration are not moral failings. They are the aftershocks of historical violence. Imagine growing up in a place where your grandparents were taken from their families, your parents were denied their language, and your stories were dismissed as myth. Now imagine trying to find your place in a world that still doesn't fully recognize your reality. And yet, against all odds, Inuit youth are rising. They are finding strength in identity, some through activism, some through art, others through the quiet work of relearning the land. Programs like land camps take young people out of the classroom and back onto the tundra. There, under open skies, they learn how to set snares, build Kamutiat sleds, navigate by stars. They listen to elders. They eat traditional foods. And in doing so, they rebuild a connection not just to culture, but to self. For many, it's transformative, because in Inuit thought, healing doesn't come only from therapy rooms or policy changes. It comes from returning, To the land, to language, to laughter around a fire where the snow melts on your mittens, and the story of your people fills the air like breath in the cold. Inuit mental health initiatives now often weave together Western and Inuit approaches. A counselor might sit beside a youth in a tent, not across a desk. A session might include drum dancing, a memory, a song. This kind of culturally rooted healing is powerful. It speaks in a language that trauma understands, but the work is far from finished. Housing remains one of the most urgent crises in Inuit regions. Overcrowding is common, multiple generations living in small, deteriorating units, mold spreads, privacy is scarce. For youth, this can lead to hopelessness. For families, stress. For the community, strain. The Canadian government has acknowledged the crisis. Promises have been made. Yet the pace of change is slow, and the North does not wait. Food insecurity is another ongoing battle. In a place where traditional foods are harder to access due to climate change, and store-bought goods are flown in at staggering prices, hunger is not just an economic issue, it is a cultural one. Because to eat seal, caribou, or Arctic char is not simply to fill the stomach. It is to connect to generations. To eat from the land is to speak its language. When that connection is lost, something deeper than nutrition is taken. That's why many communities are investing in country food programs, supporting hunters, sharing harvests, stocking freezers with wild meat. These efforts are not nostalgic. They are survival, modern, and vital. Meanwhile, in the halls of government, Inuit leaders continue to press for justice, funding, autonomy. Leaders like Natan Obed, president of Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, or Eva Ariak, former premier of Nunavut, advocate for change with clarity and strength. They represent a new generation of Inuit leadership, educated in both worlds, fluent in both systems, rooted in community. Internationally, Inuit leaders are asserting their role in global discussions, from climate negotiations to indigenous rights forums. They remind the world that the Arctic is not empty. It is not just ice and oil. It is home. Inuit diplomacy is often quiet, but unwavering. It is based not on bluster, but on presence. The presence of a people who have lived in balance with this land for 4,000 years. And as the Arctic becomes more contested through resource extraction, militarization, tourism, the Inuit are watching closely. They know what is at stake. They've seen what happens when others make decisions for them. They will not go unseen again. Inuit identity today is complex. It is not confined to tradition nor consumed by modernity. It lives in the in-between. It's in the teenager in Pangnatung who listens to metal and goes out on the ice hunt. In the elder in Inukjuak who texts her grandchildren in syllabics. In the artist in Rankin Inlet who mixes caribou bone with resin and spray paint. Inuit identity is not either slash or. It is both slash and. And that is its strength. To be Inuit is to carry memory like a drumbeat under snow. To know that survival is not a chapter, it is the whole story. To understand that culture is not what you save from the past. It's what you make every day in the face of wind, time, and silence. And in that silence there is music. In that ice there is movement. In that land there is voice. To understand the fullness of Inuit life, we must recognize not only the struggle and survival, but the joy. Yes, the Arctic is harsh. Yes, the past carries grief. But within every Inuit community is laughter, loud, unrestrained, often shared across generations like a good meal. Because life in the North is not only about endurance, it is about connection, storytelling, celebration, humor. Inuit humor is famously sharp, dry, quick, sometimes mischievous. It lives in the back-and-forth teasing between elders and children, in the irony of a well-timed joke when someone slips on snow, in the laughter that breaks across a room full of friends sharing seal meat on cardboard boxes instead of plates. For outsiders, that humor may seem surprising. How can people who have lived through such hardship laugh so easily? But for the Inuit, humor is survival. It is resistance. It is medicine. Because when the ice breaks early, when the power flickers out, when the food shipment is late and the sky stays dark for 24 hours straight, you learn to laugh, or you lose something deeper than comfort. You lose each other. And it is the community that has always been the center of Inuit life. The traditional family structure was large and fluid, built on cooperation. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all shared in raising children, preparing food, hunting, healing. Today, those bonds remain strong. The aunt who checks in, the grandfather who tells the old stories, the cousins who become more like siblings. Even in modern towns with metal houses, satellite dishes, and internet routers, the spirit of community remains tied to a deeper, older code. Survival depends on each other. One of the most powerful examples of that spirit lies in the concept of naming. In Inuit culture, names are not arbitrary. They carry power, memory, and spirit. When a child is born, elders often choose a name that carries the soul of someone who has passed on. An elder, a loved one, someone whose traits are hope to live again. The child, though young, is then treated as a continuation of that person, sometimes even called by their name's gender, regardless of their own. A girl named after a grandfather may be referred to as he. It is not confusion, it is respect. This system, known as Sonic in some dialects, is more than naming. It is spiritual continuity. It says, you are not alone, you carry someone, and they carry you. This belief in interconnectedness, between generations, between people and land, between body and spirit, infuses every part of traditional Inuit culture. It's seen in tattoos, which are not just decoration but identity. In carvings, where animals flow into human forms and back again. In dance, where the body tells stories in silence. In song, where the breath becomes memory. And perhaps nowhere is this more vividly preserved than in oral storytelling. The Inuit have always been storytellers. Before writing, before books, there were voices. Around oil lamps in winter homes. During hunts on long walks, stories were told not just to entertain but to teach. They carried laws, warnings, instructions, histories. There are stories of Sedna, the sea goddess, whose fingers became seals and whales. She teaches about respect for the ocean. Stories of Kiviuk, the eternal wanderer, who travels through lands of spirits and shapeshifters, reminding listeners that the world is full of mystery. There are stories of the Amatalik, a frightening figure who snatches misbehaving children, a tale told not just to scare, but to protect. And there are quieter stories, of birds who mourn, of foxes who teach patience, of the wind that remembers. These are not just legends, they are cultural anchors. In recent decades, many Inuit communities have worked hard to preserve and record these stories, often through translation into written language, films, and educational materials. But for the Inuit, the story only truly lives when it is spoken, when it travels from mouth to ear, from elder to child, heart to heart. In some communities, elder storytelling circles are now common, gatherings where elders share stories with youth, sometimes in schools, sometimes in homes, always with purpose. The young listen, not just to learn words, but to understand rhythm, tone, meaning beyond the literal. These oral traditions form the basis for much of what we now call Inuit epistemology, the Inuit way of knowing. It is a system that values observation, humility, and interdependence. And it is this way of knowing that continues to inform how Inuit communities approach not just the past, but the future. Take technology. While Inuit culture is deeply rooted in tradition, it is not static. It never has been. The Inuit have always been adapters, experimenters. They took driftwood and made sleds, took bones and made needles, took snow and made shelter. Today, they take smartphones and make digital archives. Young Inuit are using tech not to escape tradition, but to amplify it. They record elders' voices and share them on social media. They map traditional place names with GPS. They create language learning apps in Inuktitut. They use drones to monitor ice flows for hunting. They document carvings, tattoos, dances, and myths in high-definition video. They connect with other Inuit across vast distances, something unthinkable just a few decades ago. The internet, for all its dangers, has become a tool of preservation and creation. Inuit YouTubers, streamers, TikTokers, and digital artists are telling their stories their way, with humor, grief, pride, and complexity. And through this digital age, a new layer of Inuit identity is forming, not bound by one village or dialect, but shared across nations, across continents. A pan-Inuit consciousness. This, too, is survival, not in the sense of barely enduring, but thriving, reclaiming, remaking. And yet, no story of Inuit life is complete without returning once more to the land. Because in the end, no matter the satellite dish, the broadband signal, the modern school or health center, it is the land that remains constant, the land that teaches, the land that holds memory. To walk across the tundra with an elder is to walk with time itself. They see things others cannot. A shallow depression, that was once a sod house. A certain ridge, that's where the caribou crest in spring. A shift in the wind, the seal will move east now. A shape in the clouds, the storm will hold, but only until morning. This is knowledge no textbook holds. It cannot be taught in 5 minutes. It is learned through life, through respect. And it is this connection, this unbreakable tie to the land, that defines Inuit resilience. Because while governments change, technologies rise, ice melts, and cultures clash, the Inuit remain rooted. The story of the Inuit is not one bound by geography, but shaped by it. From the cliffs of Greenland to the tundra of Canada, the wind-scoured shores of Alaska to the isolated reaches of Siberia, Inuit culture has evolved with the land, shaped not just by its physical contours, but by its spirit. And yet the Inuit are not only people of the ice and snow. They are people of movement, of memory, and of nationhood. What is a nation, if not a people bound together by shared language, tradition, and purpose? The Inuit homeland spans 4 modern nation-states: Canada, the United States, Denmark through Greenland, and Russia. Political borders drawn by colonial hands. Yet across those boundaries, the Inuit remain connected, not just by language families or skin-stitched parkas, but by the ancestral rhythm of survival. In 2006, this reality took formal shape with the creation of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, or ICE. The ICC is not merely an organization, it is a declaration, a statement that the Inuit are one people, regardless of borders. Its mission is to strengthen unity among Inuit across the circumpolar world and to ensure their voices are heard in international decision-making, on climate, on development, on culture, on human rights. With a rotating presidency and offices in Alaska, Canada, Greenland, and Russia, the ICC serves as a bridge, connecting elders in Point Hope to youth in Sisimiut, carvers in Nain to researchers in Chukotka. It brings a unified Inuit voice to global stages, like the United Nations, the Arctic Council, and environmental summits. Through the ICC, Inuit diplomacy has emerged as a quiet but formidable force in international affairs. They are not asking to be included, they are asserting their place. Their knowledge, long dismissed by scientists and politicians, is now recognized as essential, especially as climate change redraws the map of the Arctic. Inuit elders warned of melting ice, strange animal behaviors, and shifting weather patterns long before Western data caught up. And now governments and universities are listening, not out of charity but necessity, because Inuit knowledge is not folklore. It is science, gathered not in labs but on the land, proven over generations, tested against starvation, wind, and the long dark. And as the geopolitical value of the Arctic increases through oil, gas, minerals, and shipping lanes, the Inuit are insisting on a seat at the table. They are no longer content to be consulted after decisions are made. They demand to be decision makers, and with good reason. For decades, development in the North has too often come from outside, from governments, corporations, or military interests, without full consultation, without cultural understanding, and without a long-term plan. Mines opened and closed, leaving scars on the land. Pollutants entered rivers. Promises were broken. Jobs disappeared. But today, Inuit organizations are pushing for new models, ones rooted in self-determination and sustainable development. In Nunavut, Inuit-led development corporations oversee resource extraction with environmental oversight and cultural respect. Revenues go back into communities, not into distant pockets. In Greenland, debates around independence are tied closely to resource control. Can the nation sustain itself through mining, fishing, and tourism? Can it do so without sacrificing its identity? These questions are asked not just in Parliament, but around kitchen tables and in fishing boats. And across all regions, there is a growing emphasis on education as the cornerstone of sovereignty. Inuit youth must now walk two paths, that of their ancestors and that of the modern world. They must be fluent in traditional knowledge and Western systems, able to hunt caribou and draft policy, sew parkas and lead boardrooms. This is not assimilation. It is evolution. Schools across Inuit regions are increasingly incorporating bilingual education, land-based learning, and Inuit-led curricula. Programs connect students with elders, take them out onto the land, and teach both modern science and Inuit Korjamajatukanggit side by side. But challenges remain. Teacher shortages are common. Materials in Inuktitut and other dialects are scarce. Many southern developed curriculums still dominate, and the trauma of the residential school system still casts a long shadow over trust in formal education. But slowly, those walls are being rebuilt with Inuit hands and Inuit voices. Inuit youth are not waiting. They are rising. Some become pilots, flying food and supplies to remote communities. Some become lawyers, defending indigenous rights in courtrooms. Some become filmmakers, telling stories once silenced. Some become hunters, following their grandparents' tracks over frozen rivers. Some become all of these things at once. There is no singular Inuit future. There are many, and they are being shaped right now. At the same time, the Inuit continue to face the pressures of globalization. The internet connects, but it also brings southern values, distractions, and false ideals. Mental health issues remain critical. Substance abuse, suicide, and domestic violence affect many communities, rooted not in culture, but in colonial disruption. But healing continues. Inuit-led health programs are reshaping care, focusing on holistic wellness, where land, spirit, family, and body are all part of the equation. In many areas, mental health is no longer approached with shame, but with support. Healing circles, elder mentorship, community feasts, ceremonial spaces. These are not add-ons, they are central, and the return to ceremony is a powerful signal of revival. For many years, ceremonies were banned, discouraged, or forgotten. But today, drum dances are held under open skies. Naming rituals return, tattoos are inked, old songs are sung again, even death is being reframed. In traditional Inuit belief, death is not an end, but a return, a cycling of spirit. A continuation. When someone dies, their name, their essence, may live on in a newborn. The community mourns, but also remembers. Life and death are woven together, like the sinew thread used to stitch warm clothing, endless, durable, necessary. This view changes how life is lived. To be Inuit is to know that you are never alone, that you carry the past, that the land remembers you, that the snow has seen your ancestors, that even the wind knows your name. And as the world stares into an uncertain future, rising seas, shifting economies, cultural collisions, it is the Inuit who offer a model not of fear, but of balance. Balance between tradition and innovation, between land and modernity, between solitude and connection, between the individual and the whole. This balance was not designed by governments. It was lived into existence through struggle, adaptation, and deep listening. So when we ask what the Inuit story is, we must be careful not to speak of tragedy alone, nor of resilience as if it were effortless. We must speak of choice, of agency, of a people who have shaped their path with intention, clarity, and grace. And we must listen, because in the silence between the words, in the snow between the footsteps, there is knowledge, not always spoken, but always present. History is not a straight line. It coils, it drifts, it returns. Among the Inuit, history is not something left behind, it walks beside you. It lives in your language, in your hands when you sew, in the taste of dried seal meat, in the hush that falls before the wind shifts. It's in the shape of the kajak, in the prayer before a hunt, in the way your grandmother's eyes squint against the sun, just like hers did and hers before her. Inuit history is not written in books. It's carved into soapstone, etched into skin, folded into children's names, preserved in stories that start not with once upon a time, but with breath. And now, as Inuit artists, scholars, and leaders rise across the world stage, that history is taking new forms. Inuit museums are being built, not as repositories of the past, but as living spaces. Places where carvings speak, where elders sit beside their own great-grandchildren and explain what that amulet meant, what that coat was made for, what that story really means when told properly in the right dialect. Cultural centers, once few and far between, are now emerging as hubs of preservation and innovation. They house archives, yes, but also workshops. Places where a young woman can learn to stretch and smoke seal hide, then step next door and record a podcast about it. Places where the past is not preserved behind glass, but handled, used, brought to life again. Language labs and revitalization programs continue to grow. Inuktitut keyboards, Inuvialectun translation tools, syllabics on street signs, apps where elders' voices guide pronunciation, click by click. The language is not dead, it was interrupted. Now it is returning, and digital storytelling is transforming how the Inuit are seen, not just by the world, but by themselves. Independent filmmakers from Nunavik, animators from Nuuk, poets from Arviat whose voices echo across the internet in syllables that sound like wind and bone and certainty. They are not preserving the past, they are crafting the future. But the question remains, what kind of future? It is one thing to survive, it is another to thrive. Inuit youth are asking bold questions about identity, gender, justice, art, economy, language, and power. They are not afraid to challenge tradition when needed, nor to challenge modernity when it harms. They speak openly about trauma, about colonialism, about the suicide of their cousin, about the smell of maktark in their mother's kitchen, about falling in love in a small town where everyone knows your name. This honesty is new and necessary. Inuit resilience is often romanticized, as if surviving minus 50 degrees C is all that matters. As if enduring hunger, displacement, or loneliness is admirable in itself. But Inuit youth are shifting the narrative from survival to sovereignty. They are not here to be admired. They are here to lead. Some join climate science programs, not to be studied, but to become the scientists. Some study law, not to plead for justice, but to write it. Some become politicians, not to be heard, but to govern. Some write novels in Inuktitut. Some start community gardens in permafrost. Some train as midwives, bringing birth back to their homelands. Some simply sit beside their grandmother and learn how to sew mittens the way they used to, stitch by stitch, hand by hand. And in all of this, the legacy of colonization is not forgotten. The residential schools, the forced relocations, the dog slaughters, the sterilizations. The policies that denied the Inuit their personhood, the systems that still don't see them clearly, but neither is that legacy the total story. The story is older than Canada, older than borders, older than even ice. It is the story of a people who made a life where others thought life was impossible, who turned snow into shelter, skin into clothing, ice into roads, darkness into song, and now who are turning grief into language, trauma into healing, silence into leadership. It's not a perfect story. It has pain, it has fracture, but it also has joy, warmth, laughter, resilience that is not stoic but dynamic, not passive but fiery. Inuit elders now say what once could not be spoken. Inuit youth now dream what once could not be imagined. And the land still watches. It has seen colonizers come and go. It has seen buildings rise and crumble. It has seen ice melt and form again. But it has always known its people. The land remembers those who respect it, and the Inuit have always remembered the land. As the 21st century unfolds, the rest of the world may finally be catching up, not just to the challenges of the Arctic, but to the knowledge that the Inuit have held all along, that the Earth is not separate from us, that community matters more than profit, that silence can speak, that listening is a form of strength, that tradition is not the opposite of progress, but its foundation. And so we return to that first image, the white horizon, the long shadow of a hunter on the ice, the flicker of flame in a snow house, the drumbeat echoing in the dark, the quiet, breathing land. Not empty, not forgotten, alive, because the Inuit are not a people of the past. They are now, they are next, they are always. The story of the Inuit is not a single tale. It is not linear. It moves in circles like the seasons, like the stars that once guided hunters across the frozen seas. It bends with the wind, pauses with the silence, endures in the snow. And now, as we come to the close of this journey through memory, we do not end with loss. We end with presence. To tell the story of the Inuit is to tell the story of what it means to endure without forgetting how to feel. How to laugh, how to grieve, how to live fully, even when the world around you is always changing. And so we pause here, not in conclusion, but in recognition. Recognition of those who walked before, whose footprints are still faintly visible in the snowdrifts of time. Recognition of the mothers who kept stories alive while speaking through silence. Of the fathers who taught patience on long hunts under pale skies. Of the children who listened and remembered. We recognize the Inuit elders who watched their world change and still found ways to carry its knowledge forward, through drums, through speech, through quiet moments between wind gusts. We recognize the artists who carved identity into stone, the seamstresses who stitched blood memory into caribou hide, the midwives who held new life under northern lights, the hunters who read ice like scripture. And we recognize the modern Inuit who stand at the intersection of two worlds, not as a people divided, but as a people fluent in contrast. The youth who carry iPhones in one hand and Uluit in the other. The politicians who speak English in Ottawa and Inuktitut at home. The teachers who explain algebra one day and the arc of a snow shelter the next. The filmmakers who turn myth into cinema. The poets who write in syllabics on city walls. The parents who teach children that their names hold generations, that they are more than survivors. They are inheritors. Inheritors of knowledge that predates borders, of land that knows their names, of songs that outlast empire, of languages that remember the shape of the wind. Across the circumpolar north today, the Inuit are not vanishing. They are innovating, they are governing, they are healing, they are rising. The myths of the disappearing north, the dying culture, the fragile people, they fall away when you see the truth. The Inuit are not relics, they are revolutionaries. The land changes, yes. The climate warms, the pressures mount. But if there is one lesson to carry from this journey, it is this: the Inuit have always adapted. They adapted to the land, to snow, to silence, to dark, then to traders, then to missionaries, then to forced relocation, then to residential schools, then to governments who misunderstood them, then to systems that ignored them, then to a world that spun forward faster than ice could hold. And yet they adapted, not by abandoning who they were, but by becoming more of it. The Inuit way is not to fight the wind, but to know it, to listen, to move with it when needed, and hold still when that is wiser. And now, as the world stumbles into an era of uncertainty, of climate chaos, of cultural reckoning, it is the Inuit who carry something vital, not just for themselves, but for all of us. A way of knowing, a way of relating, a way of being. Because in a world obsessed with speed, the Inuit remind us to pause. In a world addicted to growth, they remind us to balance. In a world that forgets its ancestors, they remind us to remember. Their story is not over. It is just beginning again. Like the sun returning after a long Arctic night, the Inuit story rises slowly but with power, with light, with clarity. And so we close now, not with farewell, but with understanding. That beyond the maps and the myths, the hardship and the healing, there is something far more enduring, a people. Still here, still whole, still Inuit.